Well, alright, Commander, everything's in order. Thank you for your purchase. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. I'm glad you chose the Krait Phantom with the red interior. That's a personal favorite of mine. Just before you go, I'd like to introduce you to Becky here. She'll talk you through a couple of optional extras. No obligation, of course, you understand, but they will make your craft look absolutely spectacular and unique. Becky, come over here. There's someone I'd like you to meet. Well, greetings friends and welcome back. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas. Today we are looking at the Krait Phantom, the little brother of the Krait 2. Let's go have a look. So starting in our familiar position here, we'll step out and say good morning or afternoon to Commander Headless, being all headless as normal. You can see that today she is mounted on a plinth that maybe moves, or maybe just drops down into the ground. It's not particularly obvious exactly what that does. Now, of course, this, along with the Krait Mark II, has, the great benefit of being one of the later ships, which means that there is a huge amount of attention to detail, as we'll see as we go around here. So we'll start off over here with the steel drum directly in front of you. The hollow projector in the middle is probably only about 50 to 60 centimeters in diameter in this one, but the panels on the sides are probably another good 10 to 15 centimeters in depth, I suppose, out to the outside. So it's actually quite large. Over here we have a small sticker that you can't read other than it says Krait, and there is actually some text there. I'm going to shove my face right into it. Okay, so you can see some of the truck weight stuff and a couple of insignias, but wow, that text that's there is probably 1/4 of a millimeter in actual height, so there's no way that you'd be able to actually read that for real. The ship projection over here is about the same as normal, a regular size dinner plate, and probably spread out your entire hand, and that's how big the Krait Phantom projection actually is there, maybe a little bit bigger. And this one is about the size of a basketball, I would say, in 3D, if you imagine the space station inside the basketball itself. Around the front, this is made of nice composite materials as per normal, with plastic inlays and some carbon fiber kind of stuff that's polished. No fingerprints on this one, which is a bit of a shame. A couple of specks of dust, but that's about it. But I really always like the ones that have the fingerprints and the smudges and the scratches, because it really looks like it's much more lived in than it, representative of how it should be. I'm not sure what that means, but there you go, some numbers, and there's a couple of things in there. Let's stick our head underneath. Okay, well maybe there's a thing we can stick our head through here in the desk. So this seems to be some sort of a retracting system that actually holds the front, or maybe a retention system that holds the front of this display on the dash. It seems to be floating above it a little bit with a slot there for something. I mean, who knows, right? But this looks like it would make the projection, the main radar screen, sort of movable and adjustable, which is interesting. I don't think any other ship actually has anything like that that would indicate that it would be adjustable. Here we have a cable that originates at the back of the console there, runs past this flashing light thingy, almost looks like a spirit level, and then all the way down here to a couple of things that are probably copied directly from the Mark II if you've watched that video. A couple of Velcro straps continuing around to where the window starts, and then down here into the rear of this paneling, I suppose. Stickers everywhere, just like we saw in the Krait Mark II, that are entirely illegible, but they certainly denote some stuff. And there is one that talks about in case of emergency, and I just kicked the horse. More piping and things on the side, and this looks fairly familiar from the Krait Mark II if you've seen that one, just obviously slightly different and a heck of a lot redder, which, red is my favorite color, so I kind of like that. You may have been able to tell that red is my favorite color from all the intro screens. Heading around to the other side, it's pretty much a carbon copy of the previous side, other than we don't have that cable running down this pole here, and we still have the same tiny symbols, a GT there, which indicates that this is the Phantom Grand Tourer. I don't know. And some stuff that shows that there's a plug. Okay. Look, it's very highly detailed, but still none of it makes any sense. Down here, we have some pictures that have come straight from the outfitting screen of what looks like a multi-cannon and maybe a missile launcher or something. and miscellaneous printed backwards. So they're obviously just designed to indicate that there's something there, but what it actually is, we won't know. And then we have a glass panel that hides some other stuff in the back and some wires and piping through that wall. Here we have the familiar louvers numbered 1 to 5 and then with arrows, nothing inside. We've seen that one before. And a bunch of stuff above, including wires poking out of the ceilings, which again gives it that nice cobbled together feel that I really like from the Anaconda and the other crate. Now if we start heading backwards from the commander's chair, so I'd be touching it sort of right here, I'd be touching the back of the chair here. We can move around in real space to this section over here. Now we see that weird glitchy thing again like we saw in the Krait Mark II. I don't think there's anything through there, nope. So it looks like it could be a speaker or something, maybe it's trying to be with two different textures overlapping. An extremely tiny miniature number pad like we saw in the Krait Mark II, about as big as one of those calculator watches from the 80s, and some stuff printed backwards, which I almost guarantee is repeated on the other side, printed the right way around. Seems to be the shortcut for most of these textures. Back here then we have a couple of canisters that are attached into the wall, and they have caution signs written all over them and presumably a description of what's inside in extremely small font that I definitely cannot read, and a vessel ID there printed on the back with a very, very long number. Overhead we have a Falcon de Lacy logo which kind of janks itself around depending on where you're looking at it from, and some wiring and cabling and stuff going up through the roof into the rear. And then we have the co-pilot's chair. This one actually has a full-sized steel drum in front of it, the same as the Commander. In fact, looking at it from here, lining the two up together, I would say that it is an identical model, other than obviously the sides are different. With that is definitely not a cup holder. It's probably 1.5 inches in diameter, that little well. So it looks much more like an old-fashioned 18th century inkwell than it does a drink holder, and repeated on the other side with some indicator lights that would presumably light up to indicate some stuff, and a repeat of the extremely fine print sticker as we saw in the commander's chair. And here indeed we have the watch, and there we have authorized personnel only, presumably in very small font, and all of this stuff is micro scale compared to what it should actually look like. That doesn't indicate anything particularly, just a red thing. And we can see some glitches there where you can see the actual floor through. If we stick our head through there, you can start seeing the landing gear. And some blue lights. Hooray! More of these caution containers. Even from this distance I can't read what's in them, and obviously there's nothing in them if we stick our face through. And a repeat of the vessel ID. These containers are probably just under 1 foot in height. I'd say 4.5 to 5 inch diameter. They would probably weigh 2 to 3 kilos if filled with liquid. That's the kind of idea that you can see there. Maybe an extremely large thermos, although why you'd have dangerous materials sitting in the cockpit is beyond me. Some extremely small writing here. Really, there's no way to make that out, and I'd be licking this front wall here at this point, but there is still no way to read it at this distance. And here we are up near the roof of the rear of the cockpit, and you can see one of these tray tables or something that might come down and do a thing. Try and stick my head through it without vomiting. Yep, there we go. So there's just some wiring and stuff up here. Looks to be, I don't know, some sort of a gear that would lower that down. That seems to say maybe caution or something in very low res. I mean, this is just a ridiculous theory, but it could almost be a additional seat, like a jump seat, because it has some extendable arms and stuff that would come down. So this could even potentially lower, well, it wouldn't go quite all the way to the ground, but you could almost have someone sit on it if it spun itself around. Look, that's just a theory because I can't think of anything else apart from a table to play canaster on while you're going on a long trip. Now here we find ourselves on the deck at the rear of the Phantom, and typically for these ships it won't really let me get much closer than this. because it does that, which is super annoying. I have come to a conclusion after doing 33 odd of these videos, and that is that pretty much the exterior of everything, including the space stations and the ships, is about 70% of the size that it actually should be. And I'm coming to those conclusions because I'm seeing all of these doors that are approximately this high, from, you know, if I was actually standing on that back deck. There's all of these windows and doors and things inside these space stations and inside these buildings here. Of course it was going to do that. Like, these corridors are wide enough to walk down as a person, but certainly I'd be almost knocking my head on it, and any indication of a door that's in there would be too short to actually go into. So my conclusion is that the scale of everything outside of the ships, or in third-person view, is about 70% of what it actually should be. If you look at this little truck thing down here, okay, this is a bit of a diversion, but why not? I'm going to look at this truck for a second. The door is about the right size for a passenger door. These wheels are about yay big from the ground. So there you go. If you were a forklift driver that drove this truck to unload ships, presumably, this would be your driver's view. I'm not sure why all of a sudden I've taken the time to look into this, but oh well, there you go. There's a bit of interest. So yes, so you'd have a little, probably a 2x2 meter deck in front of you, and the height of this truck, I would say, off the ground is probably a good 2.5 to 3 meters. And then there's the window that you would go into, and now you're on the inside, ready to unload the ships. And just because we're here, we may as well. These these boxes that presumably seem to indicate some sort of a cargo that has been either deposited or about to be loaded up by somebody, they are too short for a human to get into. I would say, again, oh, come on, camera. I would say, okay, I'm nearly standing on the floor, and they come up to here. So they come up to about 5'9" or 5'8", something like that. And they seem to have a door that looks like a normal shipping container size. But again, a shipping container would probably end about here in real life. And therefore, my conclusion is that these are about 70% of the size that they actually should be. And if we stick our face into them, there's obviously no interior, apart from a nice rusted bottom there, and the containers that are around there. Okay, that was a strange diversion, but yeah, why not? All right, back into the ship. That was enough of that. Now we find ourselves at the rear console that looks like a carbon copy of the Krait Mark II with all the stuff on there. It's again got Galnet News written on the side there in very low texture, thrust, capacity, overdrive, the other stuff that you can read there, and a generic picture of the side of some sort of component or material. And again, a copy of something from the outfitting screen. And then if we stick our head straight through this wall, because it's just going to be the easiest way to get out there, we can see the ramp and the doors on the sides. Now you can see that inside the side panels here, looking at the doors, you have the same machinery that we saw in the Krait Mark II. That, yes, it's identical to the machinery you saw in there. So if we wanted to see that in greater detail, please go and have a look at that video, because it was a huge pain to get into. Over here we have the same vents that we've seen previously, and this area that looks like it should be a projected keyboard, keypad, or something to get into the airlock, but is obviously not the case. And some very low-res, displays and things floating off the console, as we've seen before. Over here, it's quite interesting. It looks like a bank of hard drives. That's probably, each one of those hard drives, I'd say, is probably 8 inches long, 3.5 to 4 inches high. And you can see there's obviously quite a lot of them. It says caution, keep out, etc. in case of emergency, and a white fire extinguisher. Probably because of the electricity. Yes, it's just a CO2 fire extinguisher. That's quite interesting. And yes, and then we have the door going into what it says level 1 there. But if we step back into the wall, you can see that this is a space designed for the landing gear to come through when it comes up and down, and you can see it's a bit of an elevator situation for this one, which would come up and down on these rails when you actually go inside. Now here we have obviously our first view of the interior of the Krait Phantom, and we have the hard points sticking there, which are actually see-through on this occasion, which is a bit weird. We don't usually see see-through ones. And then we have the extremely large landing gear, which look like they're on forks or something similar. That's probably part of the ship, but we'll see that working in just a moment when we lift off. In fact, let's do that now. Try and see the main landing gear with the elevator coming up. Will probably smash me directly into the face. Yep, pretty much as per last time. And you can see those side ones folding in as well. So we'll head out, we'll have a look at some of these hard points from the inside. You can also see while we're heading out that this ship is actually much more geometrical inside, and there's a lot of different shapes that we don't really see in the other ships, especially these, you know, triangular pointy things going through to the back, and there's like an array of geometric shapes down towards the 8 billion engines down the back. So it's a bit of a strange one because we don't really see that in the other ships, and presumably it's because there are lots of different shapes to, you know, accommodate inside the Phantom itself. And if you stay to the end, what I'll do is I'll fly up near the habitation ring there, and I'll give you a bit of an indication of size of that as well. So around the station perimeter, let's deploy the hard points. And you can see that, interestingly, because they are see-through, you do actually get a bit of a better view of them from this location, where normally you wouldn't actually get as good a view. Now, I do find the number of engines on this thing quite interesting and preposterous. What is it, 9 engines or something? And we have lots of streaks coming from those side thrusters there, which extend probably a good, I'm probably like 50 odd meters away from the ship itself. So they're extending quite a long way back behind the ship itself, which is quite interesting. And of course, one of the things that I really like about the crates is how close you can get to the actual hard points. I can't actually get outside like I could in the Great Mark II, but you can see there the AX missile launchers over there, and the other hard point just there, which is really cool. That's the space shotgun, isn't it? Yeah. Which you can see has got quite a bit of recoil. That whole thing bounces back into itself. Over here we shoot off our missile launchers and stuff. And then we have our lasers up on top, which are firing, that you don't really need to see because you've seen lasers a million times on this channel before. Now we'll retract this hardpoint and head back to the spaceport so I can show you the habitation ring and tell you what I was on about. Alright, so as we drop down towards these habitation rings that I'm sure you guys have floated above at some point, we'll see if it lets us inside. No doubt it'll make us go black. Yep. Alright, seriously, someone has to come up with a mod to get rid of that camera situation where it goes black. Maybe they already have. Now, looking inside this habitation ring, you can see it's obviously flitting past at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and presumably all those things are supposed to be giant skyscrapers and grain silos and whatnot. Again, I would say that those are about between 50 and 70% of the size that they should actually be if this was a real life model. So I think the whole situation continues where things are just undersized across the board outside of the ships. So that makes me believe that as huge as the space stations are, they should actually be much larger in order to actually, you know, fit in with the interiors of the spaceships. Now, there is in fact one other place where you can confirm this size difference, and well, usually I've flown here with a much smaller ship, but let's see if we can get nice and close to these windows and I can tell you what I'm on about. Yeah, so we can't get exactly straight next to them, but I would say again, yeah, the windows are probably only about that high at absolute maximum, which if they're supposed to be rendering an entire floor-to-ceiling window, then certainly that is not happening, and they, again, are about half the size of what they actually should be. Alright, well, all of that was making me dizzy, so I thought I would probably stop before I threw up. But really, it does seem that all the exteriors of these ships are too small, and by about, you know, 30%. So they're 70% roughly of the size that they should actually be, in my humble opinion, from what I can actually see from all these videos that we've done and looked at so far. So really, thank you for joining me for another one of these, looking at the Krait Phantom, a really cool ship. I really like the interiors, I like the fact that it's red, and I like the details that they have gone into to actually make this thing look as cool as it does. So, thanks again for joining me. Please subscribe, like, and do all the things, as you know you now need to. And I'll see you in the black. Fly safe, Commanders.